Welcome to the Workplace Minute, powered by H3HR Advisors and sponsored by WorkHuman. Thanks for joining me for your quick update on what's important in the world of work. My name is Steve Boese. Today in the Workplace Minute, we're digging into one of the most debated, contentious, and misunderstood questions in the labor market right now. What actually happens to jobs when immigration enforcement ramps up? And this isn't some abstract policy debate. It's a critical workplace issue. It affects employers, workers, communities, wages, job availability, labor supply, and the basic functioning of industries that millions of Americans rely on every day. And it's also a reminder that when political leaders make promises about the labor market, HR and business leaders need to look past the slogans and look at the data. So let's dive in. A new NBER working paper from economists Elizabeth Cox and Chloe East titled Labor Market Impacts of ICE Activity in Trump 2.0 gives us some of the clearest evidence so far on this question. The study looks at heightened immigration enforcement during the second Trump administration and asks a very straightforward question. Did increased ICE activity improve labor market outcomes for U.S.-born workers, especially in industries with higher concentrations of immigrant labor? Or did something else happen? To understand the importance of the study, we have to start first with the policy promises. A central argument behind mass deportation and intensified immigration enforcement has always been that removing undocumented immigrants from the workforce would create more opportunities for American-born workers. And that message has been simple. Fewer undocumented workers means more jobs, better wages, and stronger labor market prospects for U.S.-born workers. And that argument has obvious political appeal. It suggests a direct substitution effect. One worker leaves, another worker steps in. One job opens up, and an American-born worker steps in and takes it. In that version of the labor market, immigration enforcement is framed as a kind of employment strategy for U.S. citizens. But critics of these policies have long argued that the labor market does not work that neatly or simply. They warn that removing or frightening workers out of the labor force could disrupt entire industries, especially agriculture, construction, manufacturing, hospitality, food production, and other sectors that depend highly on immigrant labor. And they argue that immigrant workers and U.S.-born workers are often not simple substitutes for one another. In many places, they are complements. They work alongside each other, and the presence of one group supports the jobs of the other. If one part of the workforce disappears or pulls back, employers may not simply hire replacement workers. They may reduce operations, delay work, cut hours, cancel projects, or just slow down their hiring altogether. And that's the core issue this NBER study attempts to test. And what makes the study especially useful is that it does not simply compare the whole country before and after these policy changes. The authors use variation in ICE activities across geographic areas. Enforcement increased broadly, but not evenly. Some areas experienced much larger and more sudden increases in ICE arrests than others did. And the researchers used those differences to compare areas with large enforcement increases against the areas with smaller increases. And they used current population survey data to measure the labor market outcomes. So the first major finding is that heightened ICE activity appears to reduce work among likely undocumented immigrants who remain in the United States. Okay, that seems pretty obvious. And the study focused on working-age foreign-born individuals with a high school education or less in sectors where undocumented workers were overrepresented. So among that group, in likely affected sectors such as agriculture, construction, manufacturing, and wholesale, the authors found a significant reduction in employment. Specifically, they estimated about a 4% reduction in employment among likely undocumented immigrants who remained in the U.S., with larger effects among male workers. For a male likely undocumented worker, the study finds about a 5% reduction in employment and a reduction of about 2 hours work per week. That matters because these are not only workers who were removed from the country, and this is a chilling effect. It means people who remained in the United States may stop working, reduce work, or avoid work because going to work might feel more dangerous for them. Work itself became a risk point. The commute, presence at a job site, or a routine interaction in public, all of it could become a part of the perceived enforcement environment. And the second major finding, and the one I'm most interested in, is the one that directly challenges the political promise behind these policies. the study finds no evidence of positive spillover effects for U.S.-born workers. In other words, the data does not show that increased ICE activity created better employment outcomes for U.S.-born workers in these immigrant-heavy sectors. In fact, the authors find that U.S.-born workers in immigrant-heavy sectors may be harmed, especially U.S.-born male workers with a high school education or less. That's a critical point. The promised story we were told was that immigration enforcement would free up jobs for American-born workers. But the evidence in this paper does not support that story. Instead, it points toward a more complicated and more economically realistic conclusion. When immigrant labor is disrupted, the effects can ripple through the workplace in ways that reduce employment rather than simply reallocate it. And the authors described this through the idea of working in tandem or in cohesion. In many industries, workers are just not interchangeable pieces. They are part of systems. A construction project may need different types of workers doing different types of tasks at the same time. A manufacturing operation may depend on a full crew to keep production moving. And a farm may need enough workers available at the right time, not just in theory, but on the exact day that crops need to be harvested. When part of that workforce disappears or pulls back, the work does not just automatically get redistributed to other workers. Sometimes the overall operation slows down, contracts, or even stops. And that helps explain why the study finds no evidence of wage increases designed to attract U.S.-born workers into those jobs. If employers were simply trying to replace undocumented workers with U.S.-born workers, we might expect wages to rise in these affected sectors. But the paper does not find evidence of that. Instead, the findings are more consistent with employers reducing labor demand overall, including for some jobs held by U.S.-born workers. And the magnitude estimates are also pretty striking. The authors estimate that in the average studied area, there were roughly 7,600 fewer likely undocumented male workers in these high-impact sectors. And they also estimate for every ICE arrest, about 6 male likely undocumented workers simply stop working. And for every 6 lost male likely undocumented workers, there was a loss of 1 male U.S.-born worker with a high school degree or less. Now, we should slow down and be a little careful here. This is just a working paper, and NBER working papers are circulated for discussion, and then they get peer-reviewed eventually, but they're not the same as final journal publications. And the authors also make it clear that they are studying labor market outcomes among likely undocumented immigrants who remain in the U.S., and not the full direct effect of removals on the total immigrant workforce. But even with those cautions, the direction of this evidence is important. The study does not support the claim that intensified enforcement has improved labor market outcomes for U.S.-born workers, and it suggests the opposite may be true in some sectors. And that brings us to the workplace leadership lesson. HR and business leaders should be very cautious whenever political leaders describe the labor market in overly simple terms. Labor markets are not campaign slogans, and workforces are not abstract categories. These industries operate in systems where jobs are connected to other jobs and workers are connected to other workers. And when leaders make claims about who deserves opportunity, who's taking opportunity, who might benefit from a particular policy, the responsible response is to ask, well, what does the data actually show? And in this case, the data suggests that intensified immigration enforcement did not produce the promised labor market gains for U.S.-born workers. It reduced work among likely undocumented workers, created a chilling effect, and so showed no positive employment spillover for U.S.-born workers in the sectors most likely to be affected. And for some U.S.-born workers, especially men with lower levels of formal education in immigrant-heavy sectors, the effects appear negative, meaning an overall job loss for these Americans. And this should matter to us, to HR leaders, to business leaders, or really to anyone who cares about work, opportunity, and the health of the economy. Because when we talk about immigration and labor, we're not just talking about policy. We're talking about people. These people build homes, grow food, create goods, run warehouses, prepare meals, care for families, support business operations, and in many cases keep local economies moving. A healthy labor market should not be built on fear. It should not depend on pitting one group of workers against another. And it should not require us to accept the idea that opportunity for one person must come at the expense of someone else's dignity, safety, or ability to work. Labor in aggregate is not a zero-sum game. The better aspiration is to be larger. We can strive to create more opportunities, more pathways into work, more dignity in work, and more fairness of how we value work. And we can create more support for people who are willing to contribute, to learn, to build, to work hard, serve, and show up. And this should be true for everyone, right? No matter who they are, no matter where they were born, no matter their origin, no matter their position in society. This is more than a labor market theory or just a concept. This is supposed to be part of the American promise. We are better as a country where opportunity is available to anyone willing to work for it. So that's the American dream at its best. And for HR and business leaders, that is the standard we should keep coming back to. Look at the evidence, reject easy scapegoating, and build workplaces where opportunity is real, broad, and grounded in human dignity. That's it for the show today. A big thank you to WorkHuman for supporting the Workplace Minute. Be sure to subscribe to the HR Happy Hour Network on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Steve Boese, and this has been the Workplace Minute from H3 HR Advisors.